Greetings, fellow humans, and welcome to the book Wormhole. Today I am doing a book recommendations video for the different prompts for the Monster High Readathon. I am joined here today by my sister, who is also dressed up. We both did closet cosplay of Monster High characters, so who are you dressed up as?
Toralei Stripes, because I'm a crazy cat lady.
She is, it's true. And I'm dressed up as Abby Abominable. Do you actually have a favorite Monster High character? Because I don't think I've ever actually asked.
Honestly, probably Toralei, even though I don't like how she's personified as, like, the bitchy character.
I love that she's the bitchy character. I actually really like her character, because I feel like she really wants attention, and she really wants to make friends, and she doesn't know how to, and I feel like that is what motivates her.
Yeah. I just always think she's like,
they
need a bad character, and they give it to her.
She is the villain in most of the stories, though.
Yeah.
But
I also like Venus, but, you know, because who doesn't like a good plant vibe?
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So yeah, for sure, Toralei.
So we're gonna take turns and go through the different prompts and give book recommendations that we've read that fill the prompts. So we're gonna start with the Venus prompts, and the first one is Plant Monster, Nature/Plant Presence. So what do you recommend reading for that prompt?
I recommend This Poison Heart by Kaylin Barron. It is a young adult book where the main character has a power where she can actually grow anything. And then one day she discovers that poisonous plants don't affect her at all, and she actually absorbs the poison and uses it for her benefit. It is a POC main character, and her parents are also part of the LGBTQ community. So, really good book. Recommend this one.
Yeah. And then also it would qualify for the other category.
Yes,
the
true.
LGBT
Yeah.
category. A lot of these are gonna cross over.
Yes.
My recommendation is Sarahland by Rivers Solomon. This, I feel like, doubly qualifies for this category, because part of it is the main character's from a cult. She ends up escaping, and she, like, lives in the woods by her own for, like, 6 years. So I feel like that's, like, the nature aspect. And then she also ends up gaining, like, these superpowers that are kind of related to mushrooms, which I feel like has the plants part of it, too.
And you don't normally see, like, fungi plant powers. That's cool.
So the next prompt is Pollen of Persuasion, which is a story calling for social change.
So I recommend The Story of Jane, the Legendary Underground Feminist Abortion Service by Laura Kaplan. This is nonfiction. I read a lot of nonfiction, so you might see that kind of popping up in here. This is about a clinic in Chicago that revolutionized providing underground abortions for women. It's a very strong feminist story, obviously, but I read this when I was in London, and this was my summer read, so very informative, very educational, very eye-opening.
I didn't realize you read that when you were in London. That's really cool.
It was my London book.
Did you buy it in London, or was it you
I bought it here, and then I brought it to London.
Not as cool then.
So shout out to Burning Books.
Yes!
That's where I got it from, here in Buffalo,
yeah.
So there you go.
We love independent bookstores on this channel.
I figured.
So, yes. So my recommendation for this category is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is a young adult novel following a black teenager after her friend is killed by police brutality. A lot of it was very sympathetic to, I think, to, like, poor black people, and, like, how they end up in this cycle that they can't escape from of, like, gang violence and, like, drug selling and drug use. It was very sympathetic to those topics, too, which I feel like is really cool. You don't get to see that point of view often, and very important. The next category is Ghoul Friends Forever, and this is a book with female friendship.
So I recommend The Blackbird Girls by Anne Blackman. This is a little bit of a younger reader audience. I would say it's more of a middle grade. I, however, as an almost 30-year-old, really enjoyed this book. The fact that it was a middle grade just meant I could go through it faster.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about this is that it's a little bit historical fiction, so it counts for that category. It takes place the night of Chernobyl, the Chernobyl meltdown.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of historical fiction that is more of like the jumping off point of the story. It's not the main focus, so you don't need to know Chernobyl to read the book, but it takes place with two schoolgirls who end up becoming friends by the end, and it just kind of deals with social tensions with the Soviets and the Jewish population. There is a trigger warning for domestic abuse, so I will say that in there. It's minor, but it is a theme, but it is a very fantastic book about female friendship.
My recommendation for female friendship is When We Were Magic by Sarah Gailey. This is a young adult contemporary with fantasy elements book about a friend group of witches. The basis of the book is the main character accidentally kills a boy on prom night, and her friends group of witches are hiding the body.
Oh.
But for like a really dark concept, the main book is pretty much about like the friendship that these girls have. I was really impressed too because there's so many characters in the book that all of like the friendships between the main character and all of her friends was like equally dealt with. They all had like their own sort of like connection with each other, and no one really felt neglected either. So I was really impressed with that.
That's really cool, especially with a lot of characters.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, so next we're moving on to the Rochelle Goyle prompts, and the first one is Scarce City of Fright, a book taking place abroad / not the US.
So I have Threadneedle by Carrie Thomas. This is actually the London edition of the book too, so bonus win-win. This story takes place in London. Surprise, surprise, it's one of my favorite cities in the world. But there is a certain type of knot magic in this book where tying knots and strings come into play.
I thought you meant like not.
No,
like N-O-T.
You cannot knot.
Yeah, can you not?
Not. But there's a bunch of magic in here. There's like a magic library as well, but again, takes place in London, and there's a lot of references that if you know London, you will be able to understand where they are in the city. So,
and she got this in London.
London.
My recommendation is The Three Body Problem by Qixin Liu. This is a book written in Chinese originally and translated into English, and it also takes place in China. The beginning of the book starts at the Chinese Cultural Revolution, which is something I first learned about from that book. So the next category is Hall Monitor, a lawful good character.
So I chose My Fine Fellow by Jenna K. Conan. I actually listened to the audiobook for this one, and this is a My Fair Lady retelling, gender bent, so the roles are flipped. So instead of a man trying to perfect a woman, it is a woman trying to perfect a man, and there's a lot of cooking involved. She actually wants him to enter a cooking contest, fictionalized cooking contest, in order to be a proper gentleman, in order to run his own gentlemanly shop. So she tries to follow all of the laws and yet break them at the same time, because she wants to prove that she is just as good as men in this world.
Is this contemporary or when time?
It is Victorian era, so like 1800s. It is all fictionalized. They give a queen that never existed that would have reigned if she didn't die young. So it's kind of an alternative universe as well.
That's really cool.
It is really cool, very unique, but I definitely like the cooking aspect of it and the gender bent aspect of the retelling.
My recommendation is Keetra from the Keetra Saga. I only have the second book by Gideon Marcus. And so this is a young adult space opera series. And when I was thinking about this category, I kind of like realized every book the crew has to solve, problems with spacefaring or whatnot, and they always like act within the law. There's never any like law breaking, which I feel like is kind of different. These are a couple of law-abiding kids having an adventure in space. The next category is Friday Night Frights, transfer student, a character who switches sides.
So I know this is going to sound kind of basic, but I'm going to recommend The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the prequel to the Hunger Games series. Basically, it follows the young Coriolanus Snow in the not the first ever Hunger Games, the 10th annual Hunger Games, which was actually erased from history because of the results. So he starts off following the law, being a good capital boy citizen, wanting to win, and then he realizes that maybe these games are a little bit unfair to certain people, and he uses manipulation in order to kind of get what he wants, and then ends up ultimately it is a romance, falling in love with the girl from District 12 who he was helping. And then it's very interesting to see this character as a prequel because you know where he ends up and you kind of see where he starts.
For this category, I chose Crier's War by Nina Varela. And I chose this because at the start of the book, the two main characters are on opposing sides. One of the main characters, Ayla, like, her entire goal in life is to kill the princess Crier. But as the book progresses, these two characters end up on the same side. And I feel like, in a way, both of them switch sides, but they don't switch to the alternate side. They kind of like meet in the middle and kind of see that the cause that they were fighting for originally wasn't right, and they kind of go in like this alternative third direction. So I feel like
neat,
yeah, both characters end up switching to a different side by the end of the story.
No, cool. It's also, there's androids.
There's androids.
Androids.
Yeah. Next is the Rebecca Steam prompts, and the first one is Hexakiah, A Book with Family.
So for that, I chose my book of the year for 2021, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I know that this book has some controversy surrounding it, especially with Indigenous people, and taking their story and almost whitewashing it a little bit. However, the book centers around a bunch of children of magical descent. There's a gnome, there's a slime monster, and then there's also the son of Satan himself. And they are more of like a found family situation. Mm-hmm. This book also has LGBTQ2 plus rep. There's so many letters. Yeah. So highly recommend. Beautiful story. Tissues.
I didn't cry during that one, but it was a very cute book.
It's like a cozy sweater story. I would say that.
It's like a warm hug reading.
Yes, warm hug. Yeah.
My recommendation for this category, I have two actually. The first one is The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan Hay. I talked about this book earlier this year, but this is a young adult science fiction, a climate fiction story, and it's about two sisters who have been separated and they're trying to find each other. And it's told from both of their perspectives. I just thought this book was insane and so good. I loved the climate fiction aspect of it because I rarely get to read climate fiction, and I could kind of see it happening, to be honest. So that was scary. But yeah, and I feel like, honestly, the entire point of this book is the relationship that the two sisters have with each other. Mm-hmm. And then I have a second recommendation. The other recommendation is The Unraveling by Benjamin Rosenbaum, another book I reviewed earlier this year. This one instead is more of a parent-child relationship. In this book, it is far future where humans are living so differently from how we live. The concept of male and female is entirely obsolete, and they have these new genders that are entirely unrelated to bodies, but still comes with expectations that male and female does, but it's kind of like a mix of both like traits at the same time.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, and in a way, it kind of shows how trivial like gender is and like gender expectations is. But the main character is reaching adolescence and is just starting to feel that pressure of having to conform to their gender. It ends up like creating a lot of tension between them and their parents. They're raised in like a group of parents rather than just like, you know, like person who gave birth versus person who like helped make the baby. And so there's multiple parents that the main character has a connection with, and I really enjoyed how they had like a different relationship with each parent. There's one that they really liked, one that they had a lot of tension with, there's one that wants to leave the family. The interactions between the parents and the child, as well as the parents with each other, was just so interesting. And honestly, the main conflict of the book was this like tensions between the family, and also the parents being afraid of the child being taken away because they were rebelling and not fitting what they should have been.
And what genre is this?
This is science fiction.
Okay, very nice.
Yes. Right. So the next category is steampunk, a book with a historical setting.
So I recommend They Went Left by Monica Hesse. This is set post-World War II. I believe it's 1945, but the end of the liberation of the last camps. The main character, Zofia, was separated from her brother Abek, and she is trying to be reunited with him after the liberation of the concentration camps. The reason it is called They Went Left is because her and her brother were put into one line, and the rest of her family were put into another. And the one that went left went right into Auschwitz. So it's a little bit of a sad book. Make sure you're in a good state of mind. The ending of this, I did not see coming. I got to the point and I was like, oh my goodness, like, because I always try to predict endings. But definitely as a historical fiction, you don't often see post the Holocaust, especially so immediate after that time period ended, supposedly. There is still a little bit of anti-Semitism that the main characters face, but it is very, very interesting, very unique. I read a lot of sad books.
And is this young adult?
It is young adult, yes, yeah. So I actually read a lot of historical fiction. It's one of my other favorite genres to read. Again, the sadder the historical fiction, the better, in my opinion. So this is another this is the tail end of World War II. This is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. I know she's floating around the booktube atmosphere. A lot of people like her works because she often writes about moments in history that are not talked about.
Nice.
So this deals with the sinking of the Wilhelm, which is actually the most disastrous sinking that killed the most civilians, even more than the Titanic.
And yet we don't hear about it.
Yeah, we don't hear about it. So it just kind of follows that. There's also a little bit of mention to the Amber Room, which was a room where Hitler essentially stole all of the artwork.
Yeah.
And they never recovered it because they don't know where he put it. So there's a little bit of that involved in here, but it's just very interesting to hear about a time period that no one knows about, essentially. So this is kind of a companion novel to Shades of Grey. They are cousins, the two main characters, but you don't have to read the other one to know what's going on in this one. So
good to know.
Yes.
Good to keep in mind. All right, so my recommendation for this category is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe.
That's on my list eventually to get to.
Should definitely read it. It was very good. This book takes place in the 1950s in America, and it follows a Chinese lesbian woman. This is a young adult kind of coming of age story for her, and so she faces kind of both like homophobia as well as she deals with xenophobia because she is Chinese, and this does take place during the Red Scare. So honestly, it was so enlightening for me learning about that time period, and one of my big takeaways from this novel was just like the time period was very much about conformity, and anyone who didn't conform was pretty much ostracized and like blamed for things, scapegoated essentially. So very fascinating novel. Obviously also counts for the LGBT category as well.
We have a lot of those.
I know, like most of these books, honestly, are gonna qualify for LGBT, which is why for that category, I didn't know what to put.
Yeah, it's like so they all cross over. Yeah.
The last category for Rochelle is Skulltimate Roller Maze, an empowering feminist read.
Okay. So I picked Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I devoured these books. I was fortunate enough to get into the series very shortly after the third book came out. It is a trilogy. However, you don't have to feel committed to read all of them because each book has its own self-contained mystery in them. So the main character, Stevie Bell, is fascinated with true crime. She wants to become essentially a detective, and she gets enrolled in this...
So you were gonna say like a true criminal.
A true criminal. Getaway.
I want to read that book now.
I do have a book that
do you really?
Probably read,
That's so funny.
But Stevie gets enrolled in Ellingham Academy, which is basically a special school for special people, and they're allowed to take on whatever project they would like. So Stevie decides to solve the cold case that happened at her academy of the missing I believe it was a double murder-suicide. I think that's what they ended up claiming on, but 2 people went missing, and then mysterious things are starting to happen again at the school today, and Stevie essentially is a badass who decides to take it on and solve what's going on, both in the past and in current day.
That sounds cool.
I really like it. Really highly recommend. And Maureen Johnson is coming out with more books set in this universe, so if you like that.
So I got 2 for this category. The first one is The Female Man by Joanna Russ. I think this book was originally written in the 1950s, and Joanna Russ imagines a future where there is no men.
Oh, sounds perfect.
Yeah. And so there's one character who is from this future, and she goes back into the 1950s to help out a woman who I think is also somehow the same person as her. It's like both time travel and alternate universe sort of thing. But I remember reading this book. It's super funny at times, but in a way that's really sad because a lot of her commentary is so applicable to today still.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But honestly, like my leftover impressions of this book was like a feminist read that is still relevant today. Nice. Unfortunately, to be honest, because again, from the 1950s. And then the next book I recommend is The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. This was, I think, my top read of last year.
Wow.
So this is a science fiction where the main character has invented a way to clone people, and her husband steals this technology to make a clone of her and leaves her for this clone because he made this clone to be the perfect woman. But then the clone ends up killing him. So the main character and her clone are pretty much trying to cover up this murder together. And I just thought it had like such good commentary on like what we expect from people. Like honestly, like a lot of the actions of the male characters are so disgusting in like these really subtle ways that I really liked. And I think it also has a lot to say on like autonomy, especially when it comes to reproduction rights, which I feel is very relevant. And I generally think this is a modern classic. Now we're on to Nathan Roth's prompts. And so the first one is Freaky Fusion, a book that is a hybrid of 2 or more genres.
So I have These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is the Owl Crate special edition that I turned inside out because I liked the cover art a whole lot better than the actual cover art. But it is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. So it's a classic and it's a retelling, and there are monsters. So it's a little bit of a horror element as well, and then historical fiction because it's also set in 1920s Shanghai. There's a lot of different genres going on in it. It definitely follows your classic Romeo and Juliet storyline, you know, enemies to lovers. They're from 2 different gangs. Juliet is Chinese, and then Roma is Russian. So it's a little bit different, it's a little bit unique, and then the monster element, definitely just chef's kiss. Oh, and a plague, too.
Yeah,
so
throw in a plague.
Throw in a plague while you're at it. But highly recommend.
I have 2 recommendations for this category. The first is Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki. It is like a hodgepodge of genres. It's set in a contemporary setting, but there's also fantasy and science fiction elements. There's aliens, there's demons, like you got a little bit of everything in this book. Second recommendation is All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders. This one is like my go-to recommendation for someone who likes science fiction and fantasy because it is just like split down the middle, a science fiction and fantasy. It follows 2 different characters. One person is a genius who invents robots, and the other is a young witch. Just like following their different storylines, you got like on one hand there's like these sci-fi things happen into the genius character, and then the other characters learning magic and exploring this magic world. I just thought it was so cool, and like for as like different as these two storylines were, it just all works so well together. The next category is Rainbow, a book with LGBT rep.
So I recommend They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. The title gives away the end, so you are not surprised. Even though it literally says what's going to happen, you kind of actually are surprised. But it follows two teens, Rufus and Mateo, who both receive a call that they are going to die within 24 hours. This is almost like a alternate universe where they know when someone's going to die. They can't give you the exact time, but it's called the Death Cast. You get a call on your telephone. You're told, hey, get your affairs in order. You have 24 hours left to live. And they both go use a special app where you can find companionship in your last 24 hours, and they meet up and ultimately change each other's lives for the better. It is a fantastic read. Tissues, potentially.
I got 2 for this category because obviously I had a lot to begin with. I have one that is more like about being LGBT, and then one that's just like a story that the main character so happens to be LGBT. So the first one is Upright Woman Wanted by Sarah Gailey. Like, this is the 3rd time I've recommended their books in this video. I just really like their writing. And so this one is a science fiction set in a dystopian future where we have regressed to like the Old West. And so the main character is a lesbian, and obviously she's been shunned because of that. And so she escapes being married off to a man by joining a group of traveling librarians who are all also lesbians. So I just thought this was a really cool book about like community, as well as like having some badass dystopian as well. My next recommendation is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is like one of my favorite science fictions ever, so I had to put it in this video. And this is a far in the future dystopian, but they have discovered the technology to be able to travel to different universes as in like alternate universes, like ultimate dimensions. So the main character, it has like her job is to travel between different worlds. This book has so many twists and turns. Like literally, I would think I would know where this story was going, and then I would flip the page and like it would completely go in a different direction I wasn't expected.
Wow.
But in a really good way. It made it for such an exciting and exhilarating read. And then the main character is a lesbian. She has a crush on her coworker.
Read the book and find out.
Yeah, read the book and find out. And I also found it interesting because like in every world she is a lesbian, but there is one universe where she is like really repressed and like homophobic because of it. I just thought it was so cool. Definitely read this book. All right, so the next category is Freaky Flaw, a character with a tragic past.
So I chose This Is Not the Jess Show. I have a bit of a lisp, so I apologize. By Anna Carey. It is a Truman Show retelling. Are you familiar with the Truman Show?
I love Truman Show.
Okay, I didn't know because we're old and young at the same time.
Yeah.
So essentially this character doesn't realize that she is set in a reality TV show all around her own life. That's how I interpreted the tragic past, because she is oblivious to what is going on around her.
Oh, okay.
And she doesn't realize that she's literally a main character in a hit TV show. Until one day something falls out of her friend's back pocket and it's an iPhone. Oh, forgot to say, it takes place in the 90s. The TV show does.
Oh my god, this is so cool.
Yeah, so the TV show takes place in the 90s, but it's actually present day. Because they wanted to go for a nostalgic feel. So an iPhone falls out of her friend's pocket and she's kind of like, what is this? And then starts questioning her own reality. So that's how I interpreted the tragic past.
That's really cool. That's going on my TBR because honestly, that sounds so good. So my recommendation is The Inheritance of Orchidea Divinia by Zoraida Cordova. This is a magical realism following the family of Orquídea Divina, and it takes place in 2 different timelines. The modern timeline follows Orquídea's grandchildren after her passing, as they kind of piece together their grandmother's past was, and then the past timeline is Orquídea as a young adult and some of the secrets that she has never told her children or her grandchildren, but have deeply impacted her life. And so a lot of the book is, well, first of all, about family, so this would count for the family prompt as well, but also about generational trauma, I feel like.
It's Encanto all over again.
It is not Encanto, but yes, I feel like if you really love Encanto, check out this book, because it is very... I can see like a very similar, like, you got all these like family members, they do have like... kind of have magical powers. Yeah, honestly, such a cool book. This one I'll be reviewing for my August wrap-up that I still haven't filmed, but...
Coming soon.
Coming soon, yeah. Now we're on to Scalida Calaveras prompts. Okay, so the first category for Scalida Calaveras is Day of the Dead, a book about death.
One of my favorite things is to read books about death. And sad books. So
Yeah.
I have 2 books to recommend. The first book is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doherty. She is a YouTuber here on YouTube. I believe it's The Good Death is her channel. Or
I
it might
thought
be
it was
her...
Ask a Mortician.
It's Ask a Mortician.
Okay.
The Good Death is her funeral home. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
So this book is a bunch of random questions that children have asked morticians about death. The first one being, will my cat eat my eyeballs? Spoiler alert, probably yes. But it highlights a bunch of different scenarios that people are concerned about. It sheds light on death positivity. It also sheds light on the corruption in the funeral industry. There is a lot of cash grabbing in the funeral industry, unfortunately. And so how to grieve and process death in your own way. This is a good starter book. She also has 2 others that I have read. Smoke Gets in Your Eyes is about stories of her working as a
Crematorium?
A crematorium, thank you.
Yep.
And then From Here to Eternity is exploring death throughout different cultures in the world, which is very, very
That
fascinating.
one's on my TBR.
Yes, I just finished that
I
the other
really
day.
enjoyed that book. I did
Yes.
review this on my channel
Perfect.
as well, and yeah, highly recommend it.
And then the second one is Stiff by Mary Roach. I would almost say I think they're friends, or they know of each other in the funeral industry.
Probably.
There is a few things that happen in this book. This book was written post 9/11, so it's an older book. Whereas Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs is a more recent book, but the Cat Eat My Eyeballs sometimes touches upon topics that are in here.
Yes.
So this is just about different things that happen when you're dying, as you're being embalmed. My boyfriend hates flying with me because he is deathly terrified of flying.
Do you tell him that there's usually a dead body on the plane?
I did not, but that is talked about in...
Will my cat eat
Yes.
my eyeballs?
I did not tell him that, but I told him that if the plane were to go down, we wouldn't survive anyways.
That honestly has helped me so much
Yeah.
with my fear of flying, because it's like if it goes wrong, like it
You're
won't
gonna
matter.
be fine. It's
you
you
know
have
what I mean?
second,
Yeah.
but
It
they
won't be
talk about
suffering.
that in
Yeah.
here briefly. So highly recommend.
My recommendation is The Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. I got this book from her actually for Christmas, and she got me the special Barnes & Noble's edition that has this beautiful, like, I don't
Embossed
know, like
almost.
embossed. Yeah, embossed.
Bossed. It's a bossed
It's a
cover.
bossed cover, because I don't, like, my thing is I don't like dust jackets on hardcover books, so I love keeping it, you know, as this without the dust cover. So this book is a young adult, like, contemporary with fantasy elements. The main character is a brujo who has the ability to talk to ghosts. And so one of his cousins ends up disappearing. So he is on an adventure to try to find his missing cousin. And on the way, he ends up meeting a ghost of a boy from his school that had just mysteriously passed. And his they believe that his death might be related to his cousin's disappearance, so the two get closer, and yeah, ghost boyfriends, yay!
I was gonna say, it's LGBTQ.
It is, and
Yeah.
also the main character is trans, and I absolutely loved the way they handled that, and how there's gendered magic in this book, and the gendered magic, like, affirms the main character's identity, because he doesn't have the healing magic that the woman in his family has. He has I think it is just like ghost talking is the male
That
magic.
is still magic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It is something that I cannot do.
So he isn't able to heal, but he is able to do what, like, the men of his family are. So I thought that was such a cool detail. Drop Dead Gorgeous. Fashion/clothes play an important role in the book.
Where'd my book go? So I'm going to recommend Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. It's one of those two pronunciations.
Okay.
Essentially, it boils down to the main character works as a seamstress, and there is a royal competition to become like the official kingdom tailor, and it's primarily dominated by men, and she's not allowed to compete. So it almost has like a bit of like Mulan-ness to it, where she kind of goes undercover in order to compete in this sewing competition. So
Yeah, so that would be almost empowering feminist read. I
so
think,
it does cross
too.
some genres, also fantasy elements as well.
For this one, I have The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling.
That's at my house.
Yeah, which she has my copy of this book currently. I chose this one because, like, 95% of the book, the character is in the same outfit. So this is a science fiction where the main character, she's a spelunker, so she will, like, go survey different caves for, like, resources. And so for her job, she has this, like, special, like, super technological suit that she wears that helps with, like fortify her, like, bones so she can, like, you know, survive a long drop if she falls. It provides her air, and it provides her food and nutrients. And so she is just, like, physically in this suit the entire book, pretty much, until she's not. So I thought, like, that kind of fits for, like, an outfit, like, plays an important role, because I feel like it is, like, a useful tool to her in the book, but also at some points it almost works against her sometimes too, because she has this threat of running out of power in her suits and becoming immobile if she loses power. I thought you were afraid of caves.
No.
You're not?
No.
Okay, because I was like, this is not a good book to read if you're afraid of caves, by the way, because there's some, like, claustrophobia.
I'm not. No. We've been spelunking. Ah!
Is that a cave?
I was gonna be like, close your eyes. Close your eyes,
Okay.
close your eyes. Echo.
My god, am I in a cave? That was a good cave impression.
Thank you.
All
You
right,
can keep that in.
so the final prompt is Scaritage, a chosen one main character.
I wish I had my copy of this book, but it is at the office because I have the 10th anniversary edition. So it's fancy. It's neon pink. It's very cool. But I recommend Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. It is the first book in the expansion series. Mankind has been able to travel to different planets. They have colonized Mars, and they also have colonized out into the asteroid belt and the outer planets as well. But doing so, it causes tension amongst the different groups of humans. The main character is an asteroid miner, and he collects water and sends it back to the inner planets because obviously resources are non-existent on certain asteroids and Mars itself. While out there, they hear a distress call, and him being a good guy decides to stop and help the distress call. In doing so, him and a few crew members survive a mass. Basically, the ship is exploded, it's attacked.
Oh.
And so he and a few others survive, and he gets on a news broadcast and broadcasts information incorrectly, accusing that Mars did it when they did not, and it starts a whole bunch of chain events. But by doing so, he becomes the chosen main character, and shenanigans ensue. It is a fantastic series. It's also a show on Amazon. Highly recommend it. It is a space opera to the extreme.
This is a science fiction channel, so I have a feeling a lot of people
Yeah,
are gonna
they're gonna
be
know it.
familiar with
Perfect.
this
I
one.
absolutely love it.
I got 2 for this category
two.
because I have 2 different interpretations of it. So the first one is Victories Greater Than Death by Charlie Jane Anders. The main character Tina is a clone of a alien hero who is hidden away on Earth until she reaches full maturity and can claim her destiny to save the universe. However, things don't go exactly the way they were planned once she does, finally go out into space. So I like this interpretation because it is your very standard, like, chosen one story, but it does end up going in a completely different direction. My other recommendation is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This is a historical fiction taken place in China. So the main character's brother was...
So the brother.
Yeah, the brother is predicted to be a great hero. But he ends up dying, and the main character, because she's this nobody person and she, like, has no family left, she has no way of surviving, she's, like, starving to death, she ends up taking his identity. And so with his identity, she takes on this great burden of having to become great. So throughout the book, she is trying to pass as her brother, not only as a man, but as someone who is destined to be great.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
So it's like chosen. Like she chooses.
She chose to be the chosen
one.
Yeah. So that is our video of book recommendations for the Monster High Readathon to give you guys some idea of what you could read. And of course, my sister has a very different reading taste from me, so I figured we would have a more broad group of suggestions with the 2 of us.
If you made it this far in the video, drop a cat emoji down below in the comments.
Remember to support your local library and shop independent when you can. And until next time, please stay tuned. Do you remember the one time we were in Barnes & Nobles and you're like, oh, this is the romance section, and I pulled
Yeah, the Hitler book.